Hello, good morning everyone. And as we say in Chabad, L'Shana Taiva, a good Keben Shiar. Today is Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus. And I want to wish you all that this year should be a year where Chassidus envelops every part of your actions, and everything we do and everything we say should be with the aura and the light and the sustenance of Chassidus. Amen. And on that note, we're going to have to talk about what's the big deal about Chassidus. The world existed before Chassidus. There was a lot of Torah and Talmud and a lot of outlooks on Jewish life and Jewish mysticism. What did Chassidus give? So before we do that, we're going to give tzedakah, and we're going to say, if you need a coin, Gidol tzedakah shemikareves es ha'geula. And today, because we are celebrating the Alter Rebbe's release of prison, the Alter Rebbe actually founded Kolel Chabad, which is an incredible organization that feeds the poor and destitute in Israel. So we're going to have in mind Kolel Chabad as we give tzedakah. And how could we not start with Tehillim? Again, today I want to keep in mind Tanya Bas Bracha Devorleah, the young shlucha from St. Thomas, who unfortunately is still on life support. But Hashem can make a miracle. Today is Yotes Kislev. It's a perfect day, Hashem. If there was any perfect day, today's the day. Let her open her eyes and let her come back to her family. Okay, so you can repeat after me. Lamanatseach Mizmar LeDavid. Yancha Adonai b'yom tzara. Yisagefcha Hashem Elohei Yaakov. Yishlach Ezracha mikodesh u'mitzian yisadeka. Yiskar kol mechasecha v'alascha yidash nesela. Yiten lecha chavavecha v'chol atzascha yimale. Nrana b'shuasecha v'shem Eloheinu nidgol. Yimale Adonai kol mashalasecha. Ata yadati ki hoshi Adonai mishicho yaneu mishmei kotra b'gvruos yesha yimino. Ela v'recha ve'ela v'asusim v'anachnu v'shem Adonai Eloheinu naskir. Hey makarav v'nefala v'anachnu kamnu v'nesadad. And now together, Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Ya'anenu B'yom Karenu. Hashem deliver us. May the King answer us on the day that we call. So once again, to all of you who are joining from wherever you are in the world, good morning, good to see you. Today is Rosh Hashanah L'Chassidus, so we wish each other a good Geben Shtiar, B'darkei Chassidus, U'Belimut Chassidus. So reminding you all, good morning, Evelyn, reminding you that today is the day that the Chassidim celebrate the birth of Chassidus. So if you know any Chabad Rebbetzin, if you know any Chabad rabbi, if you know anyone that's Chabad, this to me today is the most important day, because if it wasn't for Yutes Kislev, I would definitely not be sitting here in Markham. I would definitely not be having my Torah Tots and my Tamim Academy and my shul. This would not exist. What inspired thousands and thousands of young men and women to go on a journey to start Chabad houses around the world? It was today, Yud Tes Kislev, about 224 years ago. What a shift. And really, Judaism has been around for thousands of years. So what was Chassidus that changed, that transformed the world? And I think today, of the 13 or 14 million Jews, I would say that every single one of them has experienced Chassidus in some way. If they were stuck in an airport in Ethiopia, if they needed help in Texas, if they needed food in India, if they were backtracking in somewhere in the rural in Australia, they knew the address to call was Chabad. But hey, where does Chabad come from? Today, this is the day. It's massive. For all the people that say, oh, thank God for Chabad. Today is your day of celebrating Rosh Hashanah. Why? So I want to go into a situation that many of you have heard about. It was this fellow by the name of, what's his name? Who is the guy that just won the UFC? That Israeli fellow. Natan Levy. Anybody heard of him? You might have seen him. He's all over social media. This was a kid grew up in Paris, a little bit of a Vildachaya, couldn't control him, so the parents sent him to martial arts. Like most kids who can't sit. They need a place to be able to release their energy. So he went and he became quite good at what he was doing. Eventually he moved to Israel. Secular boy, wasn't involved with Judaism, but very proud Jew. Very proud Jew. And a couple of weeks ago, he won the big fight in UFC.
Cool.
And that means he's one of the strongest guys in the world. And it was the same time that Yamach Shemam, that guy, KW, won't even give his name, KW started spewing out hatred against the Jews. So he stands there,
I saw that in
this guy, Natan Levy, and he says, "Hey, Mr. K, you want to fight the Jews? Come visit me. Come visit me." And in fact, he says, if there are any anti-Semites out there that have a problem with the Jews, come talk to me. And then he says something very beautiful. He goes, hatred is a terrible thing. Why are you wasting your life hating? I thought that was very, very, very powerful and generous of a man that really can smother up anybody, including KW or anybody. He could just eat them up alive. But he said, there's so much beauty in the world. Why are you wasting it on hate? But this is really what I want to talk about, Chassidus. Because I'm not just a political savvy person that likes to talk about what's going on social media. I want to share with you something powerful that introduces us to what Chassidus is. So, of course, like you said, Tanya, he was everywhere on social media. Every Jew was sharing his comments to their friends. We have the strongest guy in the world. He's ours. He's going to defend us, right? And there was a lot of religious websites also that were complimenting how amazing it is. So there was this religious Jew that decided he was going to share the websites with all the comments with Natan Levy. Like, look at the beautiful thing you've done for the Jews. Look how proud we are. A very interesting thing happened. He's reading through the hundreds and hundreds of comments, and he notices that on a lot of these religious websites, they refer to him as a Chiloni. What's a Chiloni?
Not religious, somebody without a yarmulke?
Secular Jew, yeah. And he is devastated. He's like, what? I'm a Jew. Why are they labeling me Chiloni? What's the deal about labeling me as a Chiloni? Why is that my label? I am a Jew. I am representing Jews around the world. What's with the label? And it kept showing up on the comments. Yeah, but he's a Chiloni. Yeah, but... And I think, my friends, this is what happens when you are not sensitive to what Chassidus teaches us. What is Chassidus teaching us?
A Jew is a Jew.
A Jew is a Jew, labels for clothes. What else do we learn? What else does Chassidus teach us? And if you want to put it right here, good morning, Karen. Good morning, Adina. Put it down here in the comments. What does Chassidus teach us that would make a mind shift to all these people that wrote these things on the comments? Like, really, what was it? What was the purpose? And why would these religious Jews, why would they even write that? That this guy Natan Levy that stood up in the most magnificent and overt manner, giving such pride, and he has to see this? And these were not from Chabad websites. I'll tell you how we know. Because a Jew, as you said, is not described by their externalities. The Alter Rebbe once was talking about Shema Yisrael, the prayer that all of us say every single day, once a day, twice a day, right, 3 times a day. And he said a beautiful thing in Yiddish. He said, what is Shema Yisrael? I'll say it in Yiddish. A Yid nicht will und nicht ken sich abschäden von der Eibishten. Anybody speak Yiddish? It says like this: a Jew cannot and does not ever want to detach himself from Elokus, from godliness. Why? Because inside who we are is Elokus. How do we say that? What's the term the Alter Rebbe uses in Tanya? That each one of us has inside of us that makes us who we are. Atzelem Elokim. Close. Nefesh Elokim. Atzelem Elokim. When I look at a Jew, I see Hashem. And when a Jew looks at himself, even someone that considers himself a Chiloni, he still sees himself as a Tzelem Elokim. And that's why Natan Levi, who really is not observant Jew, he doesn't see himself that way. He sees himself as a Tzelem Elokim. And he was horrified that others labeled him, oh, you're just a Chiloni. This is the greatest gift. If we have to sum up everything that the Alter Rebbe gave us on Yotes Kislev, because let me tell you a little bit of a background of Yotes Kislev. The Alter Rebbe, as we know, Reb Shner Zalman Oliadi, was a student of the Magid, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement, but his student, the Magid, had many students, 120. Each one of them took Hasidic philosophy in a different angle. And I say it many times, the Satmar Hasidim, the Bubev Hasidim, the Belzer Hasidim, they're all offshoots of the Magid, offshoots of the Baal Shem Tov. But the Alter Rebbe, one of those students, took it in a direction called Chabad. And he took the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, but he took it in the direction of Chachma Bina Da'at, the intellectual component of Chassidus, and he wrote the Tanya, which is his magnum opus, which is his entire philosophy he wrote in the little book of Tanya. And what he taught there, he taught a lot of things. And we've been learning Tanya for years. But if you had to take every novel you read or any book you read, and someone says, can you sum it up in a line? Huh?
On one foot.
On one foot. Because otherwise, what did you gain from the book, right? Viktor Frankl wrote a book, a beautiful book. And that was the beginning of his logotherapy. But if you had to say everything, and he has stories of the Holocaust and his experiences of Auschwitz, and he writes mind over matter, right? He says if there's a will, there's a way, right? If you have the why, you'll find the how, right? That was his whole philosophy. When you take the Alter Rebbe, what's the Alter Rebbe? He talks about Chachma Bina Das. He talks about how to control your mind, your thoughts, your speech, your action. But if you really deep dig into the Alter Rebbe's book, it is that every one of us is a piece of Hashem, and we are holy and worthy and beautiful and godly. And even if you consider yourself a Chiloni, and even if you consider yourself a Haredi, you are exactly the same. And I mentioned to you last week that when I walked into York University and the professor had done a little bit of Chabad background, and then he wanted me to speak about Chabad women, the first thing I did was I took the eraser with his permission and I erased Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. I said, if I could erase that, then I can start to talk about Chabad. Because that's in total contradiction to who I am. And he was like, smile, he goes, sure, feel free, you could erase the whole board. I said, no, the whole board is beautiful. You wrote beautiful things there, just that is not in alignment with who I am. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is teaching us. And this is what Natan Levi understood. He understood.
I think that the problem with those labels, or people using those labels, is they don't understand. They make people shy away from Judaism. They really do. If we had walked into any other shul on the day we did, with our tattoos and our history, we wouldn't have. We've done it. We never went back, because there's a certain perspective of people.
Yeah, exactly. We don't look at the tattoos. That reminds me, there was an elderly chassid who was a survivor from the Holocaust, and he was in the mikveh. And in the mikveh that day, the men's mikveh is different than the women's mikveh.
Yeah, thank God.
How
is it different?
Well, men go together. It's not just one alone. So...
They're having conversation too. It's like a full conversation.
Yeah, it's like sitting at a bar. It's like a Hasidic bar. So they were sitting there, and this Baal Tshuva felt very uncomfortable because he had tattoos all over his body, and here he is going into the mikveh. And the elderly chassid saw like he was trying to sort of cover up. And he said to him, "What are you covering up? That's your past." He shows him the numbers. That's my past. Right. Now we're all both going into the mikveh as Jews. Who are we to judge? It's this judgment. And you know what? I'm guilty. I have to catch myself all the time. But at least I'm aware, when I'm guilty, I'm aware that, what did I just say? How could we label? How could we do it? Lashon hara, how could we do it? Right? Like our machshava diba meiser, the whole Chassidus is all about being in control of our thought, speech, and action. And so the Alter Rebbe gives us the guide. And so the Alter Rebbe, what happened was he was revealing his Chassidus, and he was about to put it into a Tanya. And there was literally a spiritual mandate that the world wasn't ready. And he was thrown into, because everything that happens physically in the world really first comes from the heavenly spheres. And in heaven, they weren't ready for Chassidus to be exposed, to be offered yet to everyone. So it sort of funneled down into this world where they threw him into Judaism, into jail, because he was spreading Judaism under the communist regime, which you were not allowed to do. And he was sentenced to death. And then he was sentenced to many, many years. And miraculously, on Yud Tes Kislev, while he was saying in Tehillim, Chapter 54, he was saying the words of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, which is a beautiful song which we're going to sing tomorrow night at my house when we have our Farbrengen. But the words Pada B'Shalom Nafshi really mean, he redeemed my soul in peace from battles against me because of the many who were with me. And this is King David wrote this thousands of years ago. As he was saying those words, he was redeemed. And he came out, and the Chassidim celebrated. And then after that, the Tanya was finally printed. And as we said last week, the purpose of the Tanya was because the Alter Rebbe was a Rebbe, and people would come to him for Yechidus, right? When our Rebbe was in New York, people would sign up twice a week to get a little slot to go in and have a personal audience with the Rebbe. It's called a Yechidus, okay? It's a private audience. And people would go for all kinds of reasons. People would go because they were suffering financially, emotionally, physically, physical health, emotional health. People would come celebrating a birthday, celebrating a wedding. I used to go every year with my family on my father's birthday. So it was always in Adar. And every year Adar, we came home early from school, took a shower, put on our Shabbos clothes. We were coming to see the Rebbe. And it was probably the most incredible feeling of my life till today. And probably the next one will be when Mashiach comes. That feeling of going into a room where there's a tzaddik that's just going to speak to you and your family. It was incredible. And that was that private audience. And we would stand in a row, my father, my mother, and all the kids. And my father would always give the Rebbe a letter outlining, and I don't know the privy of the letter, but he would probably write things like, what he was doing at work, some of his juggling, some of his challenges, brachas he wanted for his family. And then the Rebbe would answer. And that was like a 10, 15 minutes, or even maybe less. For me, it felt like 100 years, because I would stand there and we would just stare at the Rebbe. Today, if you go to Crown Heights, you could go into the Rebbe's room, but it doesn't look the same, because today there's like Sfarim and there's things all over. There's like a stender. When we went, all I remember was a big desk, books and books and books, Sfarim, all lined up in the whole room, and oak floor, and we stood. There was always a chair where the Rebbe sat. There was a chair next to. But that was our Yechidus. And if you were very, very close to the Rebbe, if you were one of his Hasidim, then you knew His Holiness, you never sat. You never shook the Rebbe's hands. If you were just a visitor, and maybe a politician, or a great businessman, or somebody, and you just were not a Chassid, then you would walk over, you would shake the hand. But to us, like, no one shook the Rebbe's hand. Like, you didn't go close. This was the Rebbe. So, in our days, we had Yechidus. In the Alter Rebbe's days, he also had Yechidus. But it came to a point that he was on his own, and he couldn't do everybody. So he wrote the Tanya, which is our personal Yechidus. And so today we start from day one of the Tanya. Yesterday we finished the Tanya. Today is day one. So if you can go online and start learning Tanya a little bit every day. So the Yechidus means that it's your personal message, and every one of us gets a message differently. Even, there are people that sit on Shabbos and Shul, and they hear the rabbi's speech.
It always feels like he's talking right to you.
Right? And
Always,
it feels like,
every time.
I can't believe he spoke to me.
Can't believe he knew that.
Right? Because that's the power of Torah. It really resonates with you. So when you're learning Chassidus, I hear Sarah says here, we all neshamas in a body and not bodies that have a neshama. Excellent. That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Sarah. I love that. And everyone's giving such really nice comments over here. But that's what it is. Today we are learning about who we are and who is another Jew, and how we are going to visualize and how we are going to approach another Jew. No such a thing as a Chiloni. It's a Jew is a Jew. And hey, Mr. KW, when he spews out his hate, he's not talking about just Jews with payas. He's not talking about just Jews with kippot. He's talking about Jews.
But the labeling, I don't know, especially in Israel, I don't know about here, but in Israel, everything is labeled.
Yeah.
A Ethiopian Jew, Russian Jew, Moroccan Jew, everything is
It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Even a few weeks ago, I had there's an Ethiopian holiday that we do in Israel, and I got interviewed, and my label was Rivka Tasma, Ethiopian Jew that live in Canada. Like, so many labels.
Wow, so many labels
for one person.
Yeah.
But that's how it is.
Yeah.
Here, I see it as more as like Jew.
And what's interesting, Rivka? It's meant to be that you are a Jew from Ethiopia, and I'm a Jew from New York, and you're a Jew from Haifa.
I'm a Jew from Jerusalem.
You're a Jew from Johannesburg, a Jew from Colombia, a Jew from Toronto.
Born Hadera.
So you're the only Canadian one.
I was born in Jerusalem.
Anyone here from Canada? We have Jews from all over the world sitting around here. But the truth is, when we sit around here, we're all Jews.
Yeah.
And none of us even knows where we come from. Who cares?
Yeah.
We're just Jewish. But Hashem loves the fact that we're all different kinds of Jews.
But
Hashem loves that.
If labels are so not necessary, then how would people... So, for example, you might eat a certain cut of meat or I might eat a certain cut of meat that you might not, but it's got a label on that too. It's like Lubavitcher Shchita.
Right.
But then why isn't kosher is kosher is kosher?
So this is exactly what I was about to say. Okay? When Hashem created the Jewish people, He created us with differences. Remember, the Jews come from where? Jacob. 12 tribes. And each tribe, if you read the blessings that Jacob gave to they were all different. They all had different energies. They all had different...
You can look at your own kids.
Yeah.
And see it.
Right.
Also
look right here. Home. Every one of them has a different mazel. They all have a different potential. They all have a different credentials. They all have different gifts. And Yaakov didn't say, 1 minute, I'm one father. Why are you all so different? He celebrated the differences. So, celebrating differences, you daven this siddur and you daven that siddur and you sing this song for Shalom Aleichem and you sing that song for Shalom Aleichem. That's beautiful. Hashem doesn't want all the Jews to be exactly one. But those differences should celebrate us and not divide us. So if my hashgacha is a little bit different than yours, that's my family thing. It's not better or worse. It's my family. My family eats latkes and someone else eats sufganiyot. Is my family better than yours? No. We celebrate potato latkes. She celebrates with sweet potato latkes. They celebrate with cheese latkes. We all do Hanukkah in our way. That's a cause for celebration. And like Rivka said, none of our children are the same. They came from the same mom and dad, and they are so different. Some kids you can't even match up that they were siblings. Yep. But that's nothing that parents sit and go, oh my God, I can't believe my kids aren't all like me. Of course, they're a makeup of so many genetic mutations from so many different parents and grandparents. And there's the genes from 10 generations ago that fall into one of your kids, you know? You're like, where did that kid come from? Oh, yeah, my great-grandmother, they said, had this and this thing. But we're still celebrated. It's not negative. It's a positive difference. But it's when we're labeling it for... and you know, even Rivka, by the way, saying an Ethiopian Jew is a cause for celebration, because to have today in Canada a Jew from Ethiopia who's come from generations, who's kept Judaism for so many years, that's a cause of celebration. To say that I come from Russian Jews who survived Lenin and Stalin and the Gulag and Siberia, and I'm still here. And so
when you say it as a happy thing, yes. But when you mention it in a bad term, or I don't mind being called Ethiopian. I'm proud of where my parents came from. I know all the story behind what my parents went through to come to Israel, to have us in Israel. But when there is different terms of like hate inside of it, that's when it doesn't feel good to be an Ethiopian. I am a Jew.
Exactly. So we have, like we said, like what you just said, we have to be proud of our label. And if there are some people like Natan Levy who felt this like sort of hate, like Chiloni. What do you mean a Chiloni? I am a Jew. Yeah, but you don't even do anything. What do you mean I don't do anything? Who am I? Am I Yetzelem Elokim? Do I have a Nefesh Elokis? It doesn't even matter what I do. I am a piece of Hashem, and that's who I am. I'm part of Kedusha Israel. I am part of the holiness of the Jewish nation. And that, I think, is something that every one of us has to remember and give over to our children. Listen, the same thing is like this. You know, we say that someone once asked the Alter Rebbe, what is more important, Ahavat Hashem or Ahavat Yisrael? Loving of God or loving of the Jews? Answer me. And I'm asking you, what is more important?
Because if you love the Jews, that's God created.
Okay, so clearly you guys know Chassidus very well. But 220 years ago, when the Alter Rebbe was teaching, this is a brand new idea. And to many people, loving God is foremost. So the answer really is like this. And I want to throw it out to everyone on Facebook. Please put down in the comments. What is most important, according to the Alter Rebbe? Avas Hashem, to love Hashem, Avas Yisrael. So the question that I'm going to ask you is, who is more important, Rashi or the Chumash?
I say Rashi.
You say Rashi, why?
Because without interpretations, we cannot follow the Torah so literally as it's written there. Without interpretations, we wouldn't really understand.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have another opinion?
But without the Chumash, Rashi wouldn't have anything to interpret.
Okay, so clearly,
it's interesting.
You can't answer the question. Rashi is not a contradiction to Chumash. If you respect the Chumash, if you want to learn the Chumash, you have to learn it, like Evelyn said, with Rashi. Otherwise, you don't really understand. If you love Hashem, how could you not love Yisrael? It's like someone says, I really love you, but I can't stand your kids.
The door is this way.
If you can't stand my kids, the door is this way. You can't stand me.
Yeah.
Because me and my kids are one. And that's really what Chassidus is teaching us. Avas Hashem and Avas Yisrael are one. Oh, I love Hashem. I'll sit and study Torah day and night. But if you're not like me on my level, if you don't dress like me or talk like me or act like me or eat like me, I don't have patience for you. Then your Yiddishkeit is lacking big time. Go back to what we said before. A Yid Nicht will und nicht ken. Abschäden von Elikus. A Jew, not that he can and not that he wants to ever break himself up or negate himself from the Jewish people. Because who we are, from God, because who we are is who God is. We are one. And the Rebbe used to talk a lot about Avas HaTorah, Avas Hashem, Avas Yisrael, and Avas the land. That we have to love the land of Israel like we love Hashem, like we love the Jews. That is a complete Jew. If you love the Jews, but you can't stand Israel and what it stands for, because, oh my gosh, let me just go off on a little bit on a tangerine right here, right now, okay? There was a temple that had a BDS movement lecture in their temple. And I'm not calling them temple anymore. There was a building that people come, Jews come there to pray. And the Jews that come to pray are beautiful people, but the leadership has a problem. They invited this organization to come speak. And they spoke against Israel, pro-BDS, in this Jewish building. It was all over social media. So I figured, instead of putting comments in social media, it doesn't do anything, I'm going to call the rabbi of the temple. So I did. I get online. There's 4 rabbis, 6 clergy, 15 people taken care of. There's a lot of people that they're employed by this place. I called the first rabbi, no answer. I called the second rabbi, no answer. I called the third rabbi, no answer. I left messages, but not expecting an answer. 2 days later, I tried again. No answer, no answer. Well, the 4th day, I got a return call from one of the rabbis, a woman. And she goes, I got your message. You seem to be upset that we allowed this pro-BDS. Just want to assure you that it wasn't our program. We rented the space. Right. I said, you rented the space to Jew haters. You rented space to an organization that promotes hatred and violence against Jews in Israel and in Canada. Mm-hmm. And that's okay? Yeah, but it wasn't us. We just rented it. I said, and if Hitler, Yamach Shemam, asked for your ballroom to come say a few words to his followers, would you also? You cannot speak to me. It's not my problem. I didn't have anything to do with it. We just rented it. She was a broken record. On and on and on and on. And all I said to her was like this. I said, if you are a Jewish organization and you say you love the Jews, then anyone that hates Jews, you should hate. You can't say, I love Jews, but BDS is okay. If BDS is going to make one Jewish student at York University feel intimidated, you hate the Jews. And that is not okay. And I was getting nowhere with her, but I kept reiterating. I said, I'm begging you. You, as a rabbi, must speak to your organization or your temple that makes money by renting space. Don't make money by allowing Jew haters into your building. I'm begging you. Because I was on campus, it was like 2 days before, I was on campus on Monday, and I know how the students feel at York. They are intimidated. BDS is alive and well at universities in Toronto. Between York University, between University of Toronto, Jewish people are feeling intimidated. I said, don't be part of the problem. You have to be part of the solution. I am devastated that you call yourself a temple. I am horrified that you are taking Jewish money and you are building buildings that allows hatred. Please, from one Rebbetzin to another, please stop. And that is how we ended the conversation. Do you understand what the Alter Rebbe was saying? Ahavas Hashem and Ahavas Yisrael is one. You can't have a temple down at Bathurst and Eglinton and pretend you're holding services for Shabbat when in the next room people are cursing your Jewish fellow person. Oh, well, maybe he's not going to curse you because you don't look identifiably Jewish, but any kid with a kippah on York University campus is going to feel intimidated. You love Hashem? Then you have to love the Jews. And this is really the crux of what the Alter Rebbe was teaching us. Remember, we are Jews. We are all a piece of Hashem at Tselem Elokim. And even our children, our neighbors who are not believing on the level that we are, never judging. We can never judge. If we had the good fortune to grow in our Yiddishkeit at a certain portion of our life because of certain events, then we have to thank Hashem, but we still have to love others and respect others because we want to bring all people closer to Hashem. Not just say, well, I'm religious and she's not. We're all Hashem's children. I want to conclude with a beautiful story. I heard the story many times and then it reached my desk again and I want to share it with you. So there's a fellow that lives in New York, lives in Borough Park. And he tells the story. He says it was in 1934. He was born in Vizhnitz, Ukraine. Okay, Vizhnitz, another Hasidic movement. And when he was a little boy, his parents moved to Antwerp. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in Ukraine, so they moved to Antwerp, Belgium. There was a large community there, and they hoped to build up the Jewish community there. Unfortunately, we know what happened in 1940. The Germans also came into Belgium, and immediately they began deporting and killing all the Jews. And families were dispersed, parents were shipped off to different camps, and children, unfortunately, were killed as well. This little boy was this man was 6 years old when it happened, and him and his family were fleeing. They made their way to Marseille in Paris, and he had relatives there, so they moved in with them. Eventually, things got really, really bad, and they had to run from their grandparents' home, and everybody was forced into hiding, and his family was split up. 6-year-old boy, and he was placed in an orphanage in Marseille. He says a lot of children in the orphanage, they were this age group, like literally under 7, maybe under 9. He says a lot of the kids in this group knew their parents already were killed. Some of them were crying day and night because they didn't know their parents. Little 3 or 4-year-olds don't understand the concept of death, and they were crying night and day for their mommy and daddy. And he says it was such a horrifying orphanage because kids were crying nonstop. On top of that, there was very little food. Kids weren't eating because they were used to being fed by their mother. Some kids weren't used to the food in this orphanage, they weren't eating. And he says it was just a disaster and the most tragic space. He remembers at 6 years old feeling what a sad place this is. He says, and then in the summer of 1941, a man came to their rescue. He says, none of us knew his name. They called him Monsieur, which means Mister. He would come in every day. He would bring in bread, baguettes, tuna, sardines, sometimes potatoes, and he would bring it in, and he would sit down and feed the children. Some children he had to put on his lap. Some children he put next to him. Every child was fed while he was there. And this happened day in and day out. He says he remembers there was one little boy who was very jealous of anybody on this Mister's lap, and he always refused eating, so that this person put him on the lap, and he was fed every day by this man. Remember, these children didn't have a parent. So to many children, this man became their father figure. He came back every single day for a few weeks, and this man says, I would say that most of the children survived because of this man. He says, definitely I survived. I survived because of this man. He says, eventually the war ended, and this little boy was reunited, one of the few that was reunited with his family, and they began their lives anew. In 1957, they moved to New York, and they settled in Brooklyn. One of his uncles said to him, you know, there's a big Rebbe in New York who's been a Rebbe for not so many years, because the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1951. He sees people in audiences. Why don't you come get a bracha from this tzaddik? He says, terrific, I'll go with you. So he stands online, similarly to the Yechidus that I was describing. I didn't tell you the beginning. When you came for the Rebbe's Yechidus, you stood, it's called the Gan Eden HaTachton. It was a room right outside the Rebbe's room. And for those of you who come with me to New York for a trip or whatever, I'll show you where everyone waited while you waited to see the Rebbe. And while people were waiting, they were saying Tehillim, they were davening, they were in deep thought. And he's standing there in this place. People are walking and learning and davening, preparing to see the Rebbe. He walks inside and he sees a Rebbe. And suddenly the Rebbe's face lights up and he says, Duvidel! Dus is Duvidel! He says, I've never been here. How does he know my name? And he looks closer and he sees this is Monsieur. This was the Rebbe. 15 years earlier, the Rebbe was that man from Paris who had walked into the orphanage with bread. And he says, I looked at Monsieur and I fainted. I couldn't believe that he recognized me. I was 6 years old. Now I was in my 30s. He recognized me as one of those little boys. He says later he learned that the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin had been traveling, running away from the Nazis from Europe, and they were traveling and they found a space in Marseille, and the Rebbe, because he was concerned about Yidden, not about himself, he found that there was an orphanage of very, very, very sad children. He undertook to come every single day. He says, and then he found something very interesting. They found a notebook where the Rebbe would write chidushim, like insights into the Torah, and in that notebook, it was all written during the days when he was in Marseille. In other words, the Rebbe, while he was running from the Nazis, feeding the orphans, he was still able to focus on Torah study. This is what we call a complete Jew. A person that has Avas Hashem, Avas Yisrael, Avas Torah. That was what a Rebbe is. And that is what Chassidus is. So wishing you all a good Yontif. Ashana Taiva Chassidus, V'darkei Chassidus. May we all grow in our attaching ourselves to the Rebbe, attaching ourselves to Chassidus, and through that we will merit the coming of Mashiach.
Amen, amen, amen.